that Onside is commissioned to deliver in Worcestershire and Herefordshire, actually, I think, and sort of, yes, more details, more information, so we can talk to him. So welcome, Mick. Thank you very much. Oh, mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. We don't use Zoom very often, so when I tried to join the meeting with 2 minutes spare, it said you have to update the system before you can join the meeting. So I was panicking a little bit, but I am here. I sent through a bit of a presentation. I don't know whether anybody's got that and can show it for me. Is that possible?
It's on its way.
Brilliant.
If you use Zoom, because it's more accessible, because not everyone has access to Microsoft Teams, but you can, as a member of the public, it's much easier and cheaper to get hold of Zoom. So
yeah, thank you. So although Joe spoke specifically about Care Act advocacy, Onside provide a range of advocacy services. We're commissioned by Worcestershire County Council and Herefordshire County Council, which is helpful because there's a number of the NHS Integrated Care Board is jointly funded. There's a number of other joint initiatives going on, such as the Autism Strategy Board and the Learning Disabilities Board. So we provide separate services to each county. So this was a bit of a broad generic update around what advocacy is, because not everybody is familiar with it. So that's who I am, and happy to accept questions at the end. I'm going to whiz through this because it's pretty straightforward. What it says on the deck is about as much information as you're going to get from me, because I'm not an advocate. I am a head of service, which I'll explain a little bit about later. So first slide, please. So that's what an advocate is, and I've put a professional in there because members of people's families can advocate for them, and families and friends, but the advocates that are provided for the statutory advocacy by Onside have to be qualified to level 4. To get that qualification, they have to have evidence that they understand the role, and they are actually assessed by someone who doesn't work from the organisation, who comes in and sees them doing what they say they do to make sure that they do it, and that advocate is then given the professional qualification. And what's not on here is that there is an organisation called QPM, and it's quality mark. I can't remember what the P stands for, but as Onside, it's an accreditation that says we understand what good advocacy looks like, and we routinely deliver good advocacy. And again, that's independently assessed. Onside were re-accredited 18 months ago, nearly 2 years ago. So someone came in, looked at our systems, processes, spoke to people, spoke to service users, and concluded that we're delivering advocacy in a professional way. So that's a little bit about that. Thank you very much. And the advocate has a very specific role. The advocate is not a decision maker. The advocate is there to elicit as best they can the views, needs and wishes of the person that they're working with, and to ensure that those views, needs and wishes are heard by the decision makers. Advocates will not get involved in making a judgment about whether those needs and wishes are appropriate or are reasonable in the circumstances. That is not their job. That's somebody else's job. So the advocate is person-centered, to use the phrase, and their role is to amplify the views, needs and wishes. Some people can't communicate and can't tell us what their views, needs and wishes are, in which case the advocate has to be aware of the legislation in which they find themselves in this process, whether it's the Care Act, whether it's the Mental Capacity Act. They need to understand the human rights issues, and they need to make sure that the professionals involved are paying due attention to all of those things, so that a best interest assessor who is not an advocate can make a judgment around that person's needs and wishes. Thank you. As I've sort of mentioned, that not everybody needs a qualified professional advocate, but where the law says they are required, the local authority is required to commission independent qualified professional advocates, which is Onside in this case. Thank you. And I'm just going to briefly go through the range of services. Thank you. And this is where the Care Act requires local authorities to ensure that they have the support of an advocate, and it does what it says on the tin, really. So Care Act advocacy is one type of advocacy we deliver. Thank you. The bit that might be more relevant to your work is there is a requirement, again, by the local authority to have independent support to people who wish to make a complaint about the health or social care that they've received. So we will have trained advocates able to help people put together a complaint, make sure that complaint goes through the right channels, is on hand when the result of that complaint comes back, will support the person if an appeal is required, and will help them get through the process as best they can. Thank you. Again, the Mental Capacity Act, where people have decided that the person lacks capacity to make their own decisions, then their family or friends will advocate on their behalf. Where that's not possible, then that's where an independent mental capacity advocate will step in and take over that role. Thank you. The relevant persons representative are people who lack mental capacity, who are deprived of their liberties, which is a formal legal process, will be placed into the care of somebody else. You will all be aware that in the past, carers have not always treated people with dignity, respect, kindness, and part of the role of the RPR is to visit that person in that place where they live. Could be their own home, could be a care home, could be a hospital, and to observe and speak to the person to make sure that they're being treated properly and with dignity, respect, and they're being involved where possible in their care. And the RPR will visit that person every 6 to 8 weeks to make sure that there are no changes in the support and care for that person. So it's quite an important role. Thank you. And the independent mental health advocate, people will be detained under the Mental Health Act for assessment or for treatment, and they go into an enclosed environment, and the IMHA Onside will have an IMHA for every ward across the county, and will be on that ward at least once a week, if not more often. More often if they're asked to attend for a certain time. They are there to be familiar with the patients. Patients will come and go, but I am led to believe that there is a certain number of patients who have a bit of a revolving door experience, in that they're detained, they're assessed as suitable to be worked back out, to live back out in a different environment, and something happens out there and they come back in. So the IMHA can create a relationship with the people on there. But similar to the RPR, they're there to observe what can they see is happening. What, are people treated with respect? Are the people who are being treated being involved as best they can in decisions and reviews about their condition? Because when they're in and patients are in that enclosed environment, they have lost control of a great many of things that we would take for granted, such as free access to their mobile phone sometimes is not available. Sometimes they're not allowed to wear their own clothing because they pose a risk to themselves. But the IMHA will challenge some of those decisions to make sure that it hasn't been a decision that was made on Monday and people forgot to review it. And so, again, a very important role within advocacy. Thank you. And the referral process is how it's done. Some things can be self-referral, so the complaints against the health authorities, that's a self-referral. Some require a referral by professionals, but either way, it all comes through our access hub, who make sure that we've got all the information and it goes out to the people. So that's the end of the presentation. That's a quick canter through the services that Onside currently provide throughout the county, and open for any questions, really.
Thank you. I'm going to, as chair, I'm going to ask the first question, if that's all right. So the independent health complaints advocacy, which of course is of interest to us. I mean, some health watches have that under their sort of, do the advocacy as well. And so we make referrals to you where we have people come through. What other sources of referral do you have? Obviously self-referral you mentioned, but what other sources do you have, and what sort of issues do they bring?
So again, the referral can come from anywhere. I suppose the difficulty with it coming from anywhere else is the person making the referral would need to secure the consent of the person to make the referral. So it could come from a receptionist at a GP's practice, if that's what the person wanted them to do. It could come from a family member, but it tends to be the vast majority are self-referrals. And the type of issues that are often referred to are issues around, for example, at the moment, there's a lot of concern about access to dental services, access to GPs. I sit on the autism strategy board, and as a result of that, some research was done recently with people who care for people with autism and people with autism, and some of them have significant challenges trying to communicate with their GP, and some people are excluded from the normal GP surgery because of their behaviour, and those things are never easy to resolve. But we're there to help the person. We had one gentleman with Tourette's whose behaviour the staff at the surgery found alarming, felt threatening, intimidated, and he understood that, but he couldn't do anything. It wasn't within his ability to significantly change his behaviour. So we were able to sit down with that person, unpack the issues, get them written down, and put it through the system so that somebody else could look at it or ascertain if there's any reasonable adjustments that could be made, or I know one of the things people started to talk about is quiet periods, So people who are concerned about sensory overload, there will be a quiet period when they can go in and they know that that sensory overload is going to be as low as it can be in that sort of environment.
Debbie, I can see you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Joe. Mick, what sort of waiting times are people looking at if they refer?
It depends on the service, really. Our advocates have plan their work, so they know that next week at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning they're going to a care home or a mental health ward or whatever, and then we get a new referral in, and then we have some lead referrals who triage those, and they have to try and slot those into that person's planned workload. So when I first got involved, I said we don't have any waiting lists, and we sort of don't put stuff and go, we'll get round to that when we can, but we do allocate them very quickly, but it's how the advocate can slot it into their pre-planned work that creates a delay. And people, the phrase is waiting list, isn't it really? But it's not something we're familiar with.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else got any questions, including members of the public? On the
Brendan Young has got a question.
Oh, sorry, Brendan, I couldn't see your hand was up. Sorry. Brendan. Oh, has he disappeared?
Brendan, you're on mute.
Right, sorry. I would just like to say what generally a wonderful service Onside offers in terms of feedback that I've had over the years. One thing I'm particularly interested in is I'm a member of the Section 117 Mental Health Act needs Section 117 board for the cross-county. To what extent are your independent mental health advocates supporting people who wish to develop a needs assessment, which is obviously extremely important that the individual has that professional support at times?
The advocate, the service is definitely available to people. Funnily enough, I emailed, just slightly going off piece, but just to illustrate the point, I emailed our commissioners in Worcester County Council yesterday because I was in a conversation where I understand some people who are in the care of the local authority as children transition to local authority care as adults on occasion.
Yeah.
And not all of those people have got access to family and friends. And we're not getting any referrals for people transitioning from youth services to adult services. So I asked I'm not pitching for work here because we've got a lot. But I did go back to the commissioners and say, surely that's an anomaly. I would expect a proportion of those young people to require some additional support. And as a result of that, someone's contacted me from the leading care team this morning to say, can we have a conversation about this? I think sometimes with professionals, they either overlook the need for advocacy. It's not part of their systems and processes that they give consideration to referral, whether or not it's appropriate or not. It would be useful for them to note we've considered, but we don't need to refer because this person has got a family member or a friend or a neighbour who formally advocates on their behalf. One of the other things, and it's not always the case around the health service, but we do know on mental health wards sometimes there's quite a lot of agency staff employed, and and so you see a churn of people who are not employed by the trust. And similarly with social workers, there's I understand there's challenges to recruit and retain social workers. So there seems to be a churn of professionals, and we frequently ask to attend team leader meetings to remind people what we do, how we do it. But it's often down to busy professionals remembering to make the referral, or to explore whether or not a referral would be appropriate in those circumstances.
All I'll say is it's an issue I'll raise at the next oversight group meeting for Section 117, because we've been told that Section 117 advocacy is an opt-out for patients rather than an opt-in. And I think it's really important that we have clarity that the availability of Section 117 support, which, as you alluded to, could help reduce the revolving door syndrome, that it is routinely being offered and opted in rather than patients having to opt out. So that's something I'll raise. Thank you.
Can I just ask for people who are not experts in mental health, can you just clarify what Section 117 is for us?
Section 117 is a provision for people who are detained long-term under the Act. It would be more than 28 days. There are other sections that it applies to. And everyone who is detained more than 28 days has a statutory right to having a needs assessment, which can follow the individual from the detention in the ward, obviously into the community. And it provides an opportunity for people who are maybe in an environment which is not conducive to good mental health to have support to potentially take up other residencies and various other needs that may be afforded to them, in addition, obviously, to NHS support, which isn't under the provision. But it's an extra support, and we spend £40 million a year at the moment across Hereford and Worcester, supporting quite a considerable number of people to have changed and hopefully make a more sustained recovery from the need to be detained under mental health acts.
Thanks, Brandon. John, you've got your hand up. John's one of our directors.
Thanks, Joe. Morning, Mick.
Hi,
I just wonder if you could tell me whether people have members of the public can come straight to Onside and ask for an advocate, or are you particularly focused on commission services? That's my first question.
Yeah, so we're predominantly focused on those commissioned and statutory services. There is another element of advocacy which I don't think I included on that slide deck, and it has various names: generic advocacy, community advocacy, but this is somebody who maybe is not very good at reading or writing, and they receive a letter from, say, their housing provider, and they want to understand what it is and reply to that letter. And so they can self-refer for this community advocacy. We had somebody who contacted us recently. They were a sort of apprentice, and that I can't remember the precise circumstances, but they disclosed something that was going on in their private life, and their employer thought that compromised their ability to complete their apprenticeship. And so they were being called to a meeting with their employer, where the employer would explore the circumstances and then could possibly terminate the apprenticeship. And they contacted us and said, is there somebody who can speak with me before I get in there to sort of get my thoughts in action and actually come along with me and not say anything in the meeting because they weren't allowed to, but could be there and make sure that they ticked off all the things they wanted to say. So we were able to provide that. I've got a lady who contacted me recently who has got autism and has got a family, all the members of autism, and she's the main carer for everybody. Things have come on top. There's a lot going on, and she really needed some support. She doesn't fit into any of those categories of support that I put on the slide deck, but we were able through community advocacy to get someone to sit down with her, unpack all the issues, prioritize them, and help her tick them off as she go and get and regain some control. So we do have that generic advocacy. We tend to train volunteers to help us with that because most of the accredited staff are busy with the IMHA's, Care Act, ICAs, and all the other bits and pieces. But a member of the public can self-refer for a sort of community stroke generic advocacy request.
Thanks, Mick. And my second question relates to residential care, which you mentioned earlier. How much work goes on within the care sector, the care homes, to support residents from an advocacy perspective?
I can't give you any percentage or numbers because I never anticipated that. But we do record that because that's some of the information that we have to feed back to our commissioners about how we're spending our time. But it is a big part of what we do compared to the other services, and it tends to be ongoing. Right. So once we're in and we're working with a person, we will, if they're having a care review, we'll be available to assist with that. If they're having a care plan created, we're available to assist with that. And then thereafter, we're involved in reviewing that care plan as regularly as it needs to be. And similarly, people who have been deprived of their liberties, we're obliged to physically check on their health and well-being and their circumstances on a regular basis.
Is that information that you can supply to us, Mick, in terms of the amount that goes on within the care sector?
Yeah, happy to provide that to Joe for dissemination if that'd
be lovely. Great, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-on question to John's about people in care homes? How do they find out about you? Is it information that's sort of available? Do you visit care homes, or is it just a formal referral process? I mean,
yeah. So it is a formal referral process, and it will often come from the social worker that's involved in the review or created the care plan. It can also come from care home managers if they think it's appropriate, and as long as that person comes as eligible, then it's a service that we're available for. So the eligibility is that they've been deprived of their liberty and they live in our area. Sometimes local authorities haven't got capacity in the area and they will place them in another area, and we will travel to places like Gloucestershire where homes are, because they're normally resident in Worcester. So Worcester County Council retains responsibility for their care.
Thanks. Debbie, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Mick, it's going back to the community referrals. Would that cover if a parent is, for example, applying for an EHCP and they need meetings with the local authority, or they go to tribunal, things like that? Because I'm aware that CENDIAS do limited advocacy, but obviously they've got a really, really high threshold for that and limited resources. But I'm just wondering whether that's something that Onside get involved with at all.
I can't tell you a definitive answer, yes or no, because I don't know. But it sounds like the sort of thing that we would get involved with. So it's that helping to prepare for a process. The lady I spoke to you about, who's got autism and needs a little bit of support, one of those things on her list is precisely that. Her son is subject to that process, and it's been reviewed, and she needs a bit of support to sort of get her thoughts in a row and be able to communicate them effectively. I think the other thing I would just say, Debbie, is I think the other thing I'd say is ask. You know what I mean? There's no issues with asking.
Right.
If we haven't got the capacity or the knowledge stroke skills, then hopefully we will know who does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, has anybody got any other questions for me?
Yeah, Joe, Chair, if I might, Jonathan. Sorry,
Oh,
I'm
yes, I'm sorry,
keeping my
I can't-
video. I'm keeping my video on hold. My screen keeps freezing, so bandwidth from. Hi, Mick. Good to see you. Thanks for coming along.
Good to be here.
I'm curious. I saw the email announcing Kate was leaving a couple of days ago, I think it was, and it was an impressive list of stuff you guys now do. You've expanded enormously. Does the advocacy role ever kind of run into a conflict with some of the stuff you're providing on behalf of the state, NHS or local authority? Do you ever have this difficulty? In other words, do sometimes people might complain about one of your own services which you're running? How does that play out? Is it managed?
So the advocacy within Onside and the advocates are fiercely, and I underline that word, fiercely independent. They have their own space within our office building, and there is, to my knowledge, there has never been an occasion where we have found a conflict of interest with anything else we've done. We've sometimes been able to refer people into other services like children and family services that Onside provide, and sometimes social prescribers and people like that will refer people into generic advocacy and similar things to that. So there's never, at the moment, it's never occurred. The QPM accreditation that I talked about is largely aimed at the provider, so Onside, demonstrating that the advocates are independent, are independently resourced, and are not affected by stuff that goes on in other parts of the organisation. So we really are a team within a team.
Yeah, but it sounds like I was just curious about that, because of course the perception could be, not that, isn't it? Great to hear. Thanks for being honest. That's very good. Keep a good work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Margaret, I think you would like to ask a question.
Hi, Mick, and apologies
Hi,
if
Margaret.
we've already covered this, but I just wanted to go back to the NHS complaints advocacy. Obviously, we do a fair bit of signposting your way, and hopefully vice versa as well. But I just wanted to know, in terms of that service in particular, are there any thresholds for that? Or would anybody really, that we don't signpost everybody to you if people are clearly able to navigate the complaints process for themselves, then we would encourage them to do that and give them the information that they need in order to do that. But if we are signposting people, are there any thresholds at which your service will get involved, or is it pretty much if people make that approach to you for that support that you're able to support them?
As far as I know, there are no thresholds, and part of the remit of advocacy is to help people to self-advocate. So what we sometimes find with generic advocacy and ICA to a degree is, having supported them to go through the process and help them understand it, a little light switches on above their head and they go, oh, I get it now. I understand where we're going with this. So we would do that. I will often say to there were two occasions recently where we were doing generic advocacy, and I can't remember how I got involved, but I did get involved. And when I looked at the circumstances, a dependency had started to grow by the person on the advocate. And in one particular case, this a person was in dispute with their social landlord, and the person was taking no responsibility whatsoever for helping to move the situation on. And she was relying on the advocate to be a message switch all the time. And we got to the point where she'd actually appealed a decision, and there was nowhere else for us to go. But she wanted to retain that relationship with the advocate. And I had to be Mr. Nasty and say that's the end of our professional relationship, because a lot of people need and want that service, and the more time we're spending on people, I was appalled the other day. It's beyond my control, because they're advocates. We've been supporting a person with an ICA for 4 years, and I just think somewhere along the line we needed to have drawn a line and maybe re-engaged at another time. But this only came to mind when the person that had been doing that work was retiring and leaving Onside, and we had to find another person to take it over. And we did actually hand that one over because it hadn't actually run its course. So there are no thresholds really, but I am saying to managers, please be mindful, this is a precious resource and we need to give it to as many people as we possibly can. And sometimes we have to draw a line so that we can move on to another person who needs our support.
Thank you.
Right, we got any further questions for Mick? Brilliant. I'd just like to thank you very much for coming along, Mick. That was very useful. And if you could supply the information to me, then I will disseminate it. And we'll put the presentation up on our website. Well, it's up on our website with the public documents anyway. And thank you very much.
Lovely to meet you, and thank you very much for your time.